Welcome back to hell, old witch. Those were the last words I heard from my daughter-in-law before she slid the latch and locked me inside the sauna. The heat rose quickly, steam filled my lungs, and within seconds every breath felt like fire descending down my throat. The thermometer showed over 90 degrees. I was trapped, left to suffocate by the very one who should have treated me like family. She didn't just want my death, she wanted my $2 billion inheritance. What my daughter-in-law didn't expect was that surviving this trap would make me far more dangerous than she could ever imagine. But for you to understand how I ended up at this point, locked up like a prisoner inside a sauna, I need to go back a few weeks. I was staying at a 5-star hotel in Zurich. After hip surgery, my doctor had recommended a recovery period in thermal waters, and that Swiss hotel was known for offering the best spa in the region. But from the very first day, something felt wrong. I noticed eyes following me through the lobby. Phones rang in my room with no one answering on the other end. Even my personal belongings, my suitcase, passport, jewelry, seemed to move from place to place when I came back. Perhaps another woman would have convinced herself it was just paranoia. But I had already seen up close how money changes people. And since the death of my husband, Richard Bies, heir to a technology empire, my instincts told me I was a target. That's when I met Anna, the maid who cleaned my floor. A simple, attentive young woman who one morning noticed my nervousness and dared to ask if everything was all right. Against all my defenses, I opened up. I told her about the strange signs, about how I felt watched all the time. Anna hesitated, but eventually confessed something that froze my blood. She had twice seen an elegant blonde woman, dressed in designer clothes, discreetly walking through the hallway and asking the reception about me. When Anna described the woman in more detail, my legs trembled. It couldn't be a coincidence. It was my daughter-in-law, Claudia. Officially, she was on a business trip in Frankfurt. But in reality, she was staying at the same hotel as me, lurking like a shadow. In that moment, I realized my intuition had been right. I wasn't just an elderly woman recovering. I was a marked heiress. Frightened, but determined to protect myself. I discreetly went down to the lobby and made a call using a public phone. I contacted a private security agency recommended by an old acquaintance of Richard's. That's how Eric Bauer came into the picture, a German ex-military turned private bodyguard. He arrived the next day, discreet, polite, and quickly realized the maid Anna could be useful. We formed an unlikely trio, the suspicious heiress, the loyal employee, and the professional bodyguard. But even with them by my side, the sense of danger only grew stronger. Each day brought a new sign that something bigger was being prepared against me. Documents disappeared from my purse. Fake bills were delivered to my room, and even an anonymous invitation for an exclusive spa session, which we later discovered had been booked under my own name. In that hotel, the line between luxury and trap was far too thin. And it was in this atmosphere of mistrust that the truth finally began to reveal itself, because it wasn't just paranoia, it wasn't just small coincidences. I was being watched, followed, tested, step by step, by someone who wanted to eliminate me. And on the night Anna rushed into my room in terror, saying she had just seen Claudia receiving the keys to another room on the same floor, I realized the plan was already in motion. The next morning, I found an envelope slid under my room door. The paper was from the hotel itself, letter-headed, and it read, "Exclusive spa session scheduled for Mrs. Whitmore, courtesy of the manager." I hadn't requested anything, but the signature, forged to perfection, looked as if it had come straight from the administration office. Anna, who was passing through the hallway, was the first to notice my expression. "You didn't book this, did you?" she asked, gripping her cleaning cart tightly. "No," I replied. "But someone wants me to believe I did." I showed the note to Eric, who had arrived early to join me for breakfast. He examined the paper with military focus. "It's an invitation to death," he said in a low voice, But if we refuse, she'll try something else. Maybe it's better to play the game and be prepared." I accepted his advice. At 5 p.m., I headed to the hotel spa. The place, usually full of guests relaxing between hot pools and massage rooms, was mysteriously empty. The silence was so dense I could hear the pounding of my own heart. Claudia appeared a few minutes later. She wore a white silk robe, a sharp smile on her face. "Oh, mother-in-law, what a surprise to find you here. I personally requested this courtesy in your name. I thought it would be good for your hip," she said with artificial sweetness. It was the first time she stopped hiding. Now she played openly. "I thought you were in Frankfurt," I replied firmly. I was, but family comes first, doesn't it? She winked, and for a second I could see the cold glint behind her mask. Eric stayed outside under the pretext of answering a phone call, but in truth, he watched every move. Anna, disguised among the staff, had promised to keep an eye as well. I wasn't alone, and that gave me a false sense of control. The spa attendant, visibly nervous, guided me into the sauna room. "Just 15 minutes, madam. Temperature adjusted for your treatment," she said, avoiding eye contact. I noticed the tremor in her hands. She knew something wasn't right. I entered. The heat was immediate, suffocating, but bearable. I closed my eyes, trying to control my breathing. That's when I heard the metallic click. The door. I opened my eyes and saw, through the small glass window, Claudia's face. A slow smile spread across her lips as she slid the safety latch. "Welcome back to hell, old witch," she murmured, before turning the thermostat to the maximum. The steam surged within seconds, swallowing the air in the room. My skin burned, my chest felt like it would burst. I screamed, pounded against the door, but the sound was swallowed by the muffled hum of the sauna. Outside, no one moved. Claudia watched as if attending a private show. I understood, in that moment, that this was no longer about insinuations or small scares. She had crossed the line. Death was no longer a distant possibility. It was a decreed sentence. And as my vision began to blur, I thought only of one thing. Would Anna and Eric arrive in time? Or would I become just another spa tragedy in the Swiss newspapers? When I regained consciousness, I was lying on an improvised stretcher in the back of the hotel. Anna was fanning me with a damp towel, and Eric kept the door locked. I didn't know how long I had been inside the sauna, but I felt every muscle in my body burning. "You can't go back to your room," Eric said firmly. "She'll try again." He was right. But when I asked where Claudia was, no one could answer. The employee who had helped us break down the door said that, right after the commotion, she had vanished. She simply changed clothes, left through the side garage, and was never seen again. It was as if she had never been there. At the reception, lodging records showed another name, another passport. Claudia had used false documents to infiltrate the hotel. She came in, did the dirty work, and left before any trace could link her to the crime. Meanwhile, the accomplice staff hurried to call contacts in the local press, whispering about the tragedy that had occurred at the spa. The version that spread within a few hours was simple and convenient. Mrs. Whitmore did not survive a collapse inside the sauna. But Anna had an ace up her sleeve. Her brother worked as a driver for a private ambulance company. For a larger sum than what Claudia had offered, he agreed to spread an alternative version. A body had been discreetly removed from the hotel, as if it were mine. That detail changed everything. The next day, the news appeared in the Swiss newspapers. 72-year-old American heiress dies in tragic spa accident. The text spoke of post-surgery fragility, memory lapses, and medication use, a convenient narrative that reinforced the image of a weakened old lady. But there was one problem. There was no body, only the forged version Claudia had paid to make official. While the world believed the lie, I was hiding in a remote chalet, rented by Eric under a false name. I still breathed with difficulty, but I was alive. The following morning, he took me to a trusted doctor in Lucerne, far from Claudia's circle. The doctor examined my lungs, my heart, and by a miracle, there were no serious after-effects. "You're lucky," he said. 10 more minutes at that temperature, and I'd be signing your death certificate. That was exactly what Claudia wanted, an official paper confirming her victory. But ironically, that document would never exist. Instead, we had another form of evidence: the bought silence of the employees, the false lodging records, the absence of witnesses. Every detail showed this was no accident, but rather a meticulously planned conspiracy. Anna organized everything into a blue folder: newspaper clippings, copies of internal receipts, even notes from employees who saw Claudia enter and leave under another name. "She made it look like she was never here," Anna said. "But we know she was, and sooner or later the traces will surface." In that isolated chalet, between bandages and hot tea, a certainty grew inside me. I had not only survived, I had gained a precious advantage. To the eyes of the world, Eleanor Whitmore was dead, and this death was the weapon that would allow me to turn the game around. The next day, news of my supposed death spread like wildfire. Swiss newspapers, American outlets, even financial gossip sites repeated the same headline: "Billionaire Eleanor Whitmore dies in spa accident in Europe." But there was one detail no one could explain: there was no body. The hotel, pressed by journalists, merely stated that a private emergency medical company had taken the lady away in critical condition, and that, unfortunately, she had not survived on the way. No official document, no death certificate, nothing but purchased words, and that's when my son appeared. Andrew gave interviews in front of the cameras, his voice breaking, his eyes red. "I want answers. My mother didn't deserve to disappear like this. Where is her body? Where are the medical records?" He seemed genuinely shaken. But as I heard his voice repeating those questions, a chill ran down my spine. Did he know more than he let on? Or was he simply performing for the press, manipulated by Claudia? The Swiss police, cold and methodical, declared at a press conference, "No body, no report. Without a body, we cannot confirm the death." The emptiness of those words spread like an earthquake. Headlines began to change their tone. "Mystery surrounds the death of Eleanor Whitmore." "Heiress disappears in luxury hotel. Body never found." With each passing hour, more questions emerged. Where was the corpse? Why wasn't there a formal investigation? How could a 5-star hotel allow an accident with no reliable witnesses? It was that pressure that opened the door for something bigger. Because when the name of a $2 billion fortune circulates alongside words like mystery, accident, and heirs, no local authority can hold the matter alone. And then the FBI stepped in. Officially, they claimed it was a case of international interest involving American assets, possible financial crimes, and suspicions of fraud. But I knew the truth. Claudia had tried to erase all traces, and in the process, she left too many. From the chalet where I was hiding, I followed every report. I saw Andrew in front of the cameras, demanding investigations, and I couldn't decide which hurt more: his gaze, which could have been real grief, or his calculated tone, which could very well have been rehearsed. At that moment, I still wasn't sure. Neither was the world. But there was one question no one could answer, and which would soon become my trump card. How do you hold a funeral without a body? The hotel issued official statements. The press repeated the purchased versions, but there was one problem Claudia couldn't solve with money. There was no body to bury. Even so, she organized a luxurious funeral in Boston, as if it were possible to honor someone who had never left Zurich. The justification was quick and cruel. The body was cremated immediately by medical order to avoid international legal complications. a well-constructed lie repeated so many times that it began to sound plausible. The church hall was full. Businessmen, politicians, longtime neighbors, onlookers. Everyone whispered the same things. So sudden, but she looked fine. What a tragedy. At the center, a closed casket, heavy only with flowers. There were no remains. There was no farewell, only a carefully staged theater. Claudia wore black from head to toe, with a delicate veil hiding her dry eyes. She knew how to cry when everyone was watching, and smile discreetly when no one was looking. Every gesture of hers was calculated, like that of an award-winning actress. Andrew stood beside her, supporting her, but with a rigid expression. He clasped his hands as if trying to hold back the pain or conceal something deeper. His trembling voice echoed through the microphone. My mother was a strong woman, but fate was relentless. We, who loved her, must move forward. The audience sobbed, and for a moment it seemed the performance had worked, but I watched from afar, hidden in a car parked across the street. With Eric at the wheel, binoculars in hand, I recorded every detail. This wasn't just the funeral of a billionaire. It was the perfect stage for an inheritance scheme. Anna, always attentive, discreetly photographed the side entrances of the church. Look at that, she whispered, showing me the camera screen. A group of lawyers was gathered in a corner, papers in hand, as if waiting only for the end of the ceremony to take the next step. They weren't there to say goodbye. They were there to start the succession process. And that's when I realized the urgency. Claudia didn't just want to end the farce with flowers. She wanted, that very day, to turn my death into a legal document. When the casket was carried out, closed and heavy inside only with cement, the looks were divided. Half saw a grieving widow and a devastated son. The other half saw something strange, uncomfortable, hard to explain. The murmur in the corridors grew. Why was the cremation so quick? Why could no one see the body? And why are the lawyers already here? It was only a matter of time before someone asked the same question that echoed inside me. If there was no body, who exactly was being buried there? From the chalet where I was hiding, I followed every detail as if I were a spectator at my own funeral. Televisions on odd newspapers scattered across the table, clippings stored in blue folders. At first, it seemed Claudia's charade would work. Headlines spoke of tragedy and a dignified farewell. But it only took 2 days for contradictions to begin surfacing. Why wasn't the body transported home? Why was the cremation so quick, with no family witnesses? Why did the lawyers enter the church before the mass ended? The questions popped up in blogs, society columns, even financial reports. Investors in the company Richard had founded began calling the board, demanding explanations. A dead heiress meant instability, and instability cost billions. Claudia, predictable as ever, tried to control the narrative. She gave quick interviews, always dressed in black, her voice low. The pain is ours, but we must move forward. My mother-in-law would have wanted it this way. Some believed her, others did not. Andrew, meanwhile, maintained an ambiguous tone. At times he appeared crying at Claudia's side. Other times he vanished from the cameras, as if he couldn't handle the exposure. To some, he was a devastated son. To others, a man hiding something. And to me, watching from afar, it was impossible not to wonder, was he deceived by Claudia, or had he been part of the performance from the beginning? While doubt grew, the FBI expanded its reach. Officers discreetly appeared in Zurich, requesting hotel records, security footage, immigration data. But they ran into a wall of forged papers. Claudia had entered and left under another name, another passport. Officially, she had never been there. It was Anna who found the first crack. Digging through the hotel's back offices, she obtained copies of internal receipts. On one of them, A cash payment for extraordinary services coincided exactly with the night of the sauna. "Here it is," she said, handing me the paper with trembling hands. "This is proof there was a cover-up." Eric examined the document carefully. "If we follow this trail, we'll find more. And the more we uncover, the clearer it will be that your death was fabricated." I sat in the armchair, the paper in my hands, and a thought struck me. Maybe this was the key. While Claudia rushed to legalize my inheritance, I could use the very lie as a trap. If the world believed I was dead, then that was how I would strike. But there was a problem. The same document that exposed the employee's corruption also revealed another detail: an abbreviated name, a side signature that looked familiar. Just 2 letters, A.W. My heart pounded. Andrew Whitmore. Was it just a coincidence? Or was my son far more involved than he dared admit? I thought I had already seen everything. The empty funeral, the flower-filled casket, the lawyers rushing to open the estate. But nothing prepared me for what I found in the Sunday newspaper headlines. Claudia Whitmore announces birth of son, legitimate heir to the family fortune. The photograph covered half a page. Claudia, impeccably made up, holding a baby wrapped in expensive blankets. Beside her, Andrew, serious and downcast, completed the picture of the family in mourning, yet united by the future. My heart raced. That baby wasn't theirs. I knew it. Claudia hadn't been pregnant. I had seen her myself just weeks earlier, walking around the hotel, as slim as ever. And yet, there was the image, spread across the entire press, as if it were the definitive proof of a new generation ready to take over the empire. In the article, Claudia spoke of a blessing amid tragedy and thanked all who supported the family in this difficult time. Andrew, in his few words, said only, "My mother would have wanted to know that her legacy will live on through our son, my daughter-in-law, a fabricated baby to erase my existence." Anna turned pale as she read with me. They can't just buy a child and pretend it's theirs," she whispered, outraged. But they could, and they were. The following reports made their goal clear. Claudia and Andrew claimed that, given the fragility of the moment, they needed to advance part of the inheritance to provide stability for the newborn and move away from the painful memories of loss. It was all too perfect. Dead mother, devastated son, resilient widow, baby to inherit. A theater staged piece by piece. I knew what would come next. Lawyers demanding urgency in court. Judges pressured by the press. Banks releasing funds in the name of family continuity. Within weeks, everything Richard and I had built could be handed over to 2 people who had tried to kill me. The anger burned inside me, but it also brought clarity. They want speed. I told Eric, that means they'll also make mistakes. Eric nodded, and mistakes leave traces. The FBI was already beginning to sniff out the fraud. An agent had discreetly visited the hotel in Zurich, requesting security footage, receipts, guest records. But since Claudia had used false documents, the trail was nearly invisible. Nearly. Anna, with her eye for details, began jotting down every inconsistency, the dates of the photos, Andrew's repeated clothing in different newspapers, the baby that seemed to change appearance within just a few weeks. "They're improvising," she said, "and improvisation leaves holes." I knew the time had come to turn the game around. Until then, I had only survived, watching from afar while they staged my mourning. But now, with a fake baby at the center of the spectacle, I had a powerful weapon. The farce was too big to be sustained for long. I grabbed my folder of documents, sat at the table, and began to plan. If the world believes I am dead, then it is as dead that I will strike. With each clipping, each newspaper note, each suspicious receipt, I wasn't just building a dossier, I was building my resurrection. And I knew exactly what the first step would be, making Claudia and Andrew realize that the ghost of Eleanor Whitmore would not leave them in peace. The week after the announcement of the heir, Claudia's lawyers filed an emergency petition in the Boston court, early release of part of the inheritance, on the grounds that the newborn needed immediate stability and the family was too emotionally shaken to handle prolonged bureaucracy. It was grotesque theater. Documents with fresh stamps circulated as if they were old. Signatures appeared with no clear origin. But faced with the image of the grieving widow and the devastated son holding a baby, who would dare to doubt? The press bought the narrative for a few days. Headlines spoke of compassion for the Whitmore family and how the law needed to be humane in the face of grief. I watched from afar, from the chalet, and with each line I felt my blood boil. They won't stop until they empty everything, I said to Eric, slamming my hand on the table. Then it's time to remind them that the dead can take revenge too, he replied, half serious, half ironic. That was how my counterattack was born. Anna helped compile all the clippings and receipts we had kept since the spa, doctored notes, forged reports, testimonies from hotel employees who had received money in envelopes. Eric, in turn, used old military contacts to ensure the material reached the right destination without leaving a trace. In less than a week, 3 investigative journalists and an FBI agent received identical packages, all signed with just one phrase: "She didn't die. Look harder." The effects were immediate. One of the journalists published a column hinting at irregularities. Curiously, no official death certificate was registered in Switzerland. And why would the body have been cremated without authorization from the son, supposedly so devoted? Another reporter revealed that the baby photos showed inconsistencies. In one, the child seemed only a few days old. In another, weeks older, though both images were released with the same date. Claudia reacted quickly. She appeared in front of cameras, crying with perfection. It's outrageous that, in the midst of our mourning, people spread such insensitive theories. We're just trying to protect our son. Some believed her. Others began to hesitate. Andrew, once again, kept his ambiguous air. He spoke little, let Claudia dominate the statements, but was always there, eyes downcast, as if carrying a secret. And I knew what that secret was. While they sped up the court process, the FBI intensified its investigation. The anonymous packages had raised red flags: billionaire heiress missing, no body, contested inheritance, and a baby of dubious origin. It was the perfect combination for a federal operation, but the most delicious detail was still to come. One of the documents we sent, a cash payment receipt issued by the hotel, ended up in the hands of a federal agent. And there, scribbled on the side, were the same 2 letters I had seen before: A.W., Andrew Whitmore. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. The world still doubted. The press still applauded them. But soon everyone would see that this was not a family tragedy, but a meticulously orchestrated crime. And that was the moment I realized my ghost was taking shape. 2 weeks after the funeral, the perfect narrative began to crack in public. Not because of a big scoop, but because of an accumulation of details: invoices that didn't match, dates that didn't add up, images of a baby released on the same day but showing differences of days, perhaps weeks, in the size and color of the umbilical cord. Small cracks that, seen from afar, formed a massive fracture. The FBI intensified its work. An agent called an old contact of Eric's, asking for what they called a cross-check. Within 48 hours, the first official confirmations arrived. No death record for Eleanor Whitmore in Switzerland between April 1st and 30. 0 requests for international transfer of remains under my name during the same period. The hotel issued cash receipts labeled as extraordinary services for CHF 28,000, dated exactly the night of the sauna. The security footage was unavailable due to maintenance in that specific corridor, a coincidence laughable to any serious investigator. The press smelled blood. A financial columnist wrote, "How long will we accept billions changing hands without a death certificate, without a record, without a body, without reports?" Another, More biting. Inheritance with a headline baby, but no mother on a death certificate. Claudia doubled down on the act. In flawless morning attire, she spoke on TV for 3 minutes and 12 seconds, repeating the idea that trauma demands urgency and that the best for the newborn is an immediate move. She requested an advance of $120 million for family stabilization, staff payment, and residential transition. The banks, wary of reputational risk, demanded a judicial ruling. Andrew lingered on the margins. In some photos, his hand rested on Claudia's shoulder. In others, his gaze seemed lost, as if swept into a hurricane. When a reporter asked if he had authorized the cremation, he replied, "It all happened very fast. Nothing more." Ambiguous enough to be read as grief or rehearsal. While we watched from the chalet, Anna appeared with a brown envelope. Inside, 3 clippings and a copy of an internal email leaked by a hotel employee, who, according to Anna, didn't want this on her conscience. A hotel memo at 10:14 p.m. Client removed by private team, situation resolved. A receipt with no logo, only a stamp. CHF, 6,500. Gratuity. The email. Confirmed to the press there was a collapse. No body. Say the family arranged cremation. No legible signature, but initials at the footer. A. Thunder. Eric pressed his fists to the table. This could mean many things. A W. Could be any manager with a strange name. I nodded, out loud, to convince myself. It could. But the doubt already sat before me like a 4th person in the chalet. The FBI also brought another piece, the baby announcement. The journalist who had received our dossier traced the half-page photo and discovered that the studio had done 2 sessions with 2 different newborns in the same week to meet scheduling needs. In one image, the hospital bracelet bore a Queens, NY maternity code. In the other, a discreet seal from a private clinic in Stamford, CT. A single baby doesn't switch hospitals, but a swapped photo does. They built an album to fit the inheritance schedule, Anna said, her voice tight. That's when I noticed something simple and merciless. They were in a hurry, and haste makes mistakes. Anticipated documents, misaligned versions, receipts without headers, invented timelines. I didn't need to prove everything. I only needed to prove enough for the house of cards to fall. We decided the next step in silence, like signing a pact. Package 2 for the press. The 2 baby photos with different maternity codes, side by side, with the caption, "A singular heir with 2 births." Package 2 for the FBI, hotel receipts, the email with AW, the conflicting timelines, the financial columnist's piece, plus a Swiss medical certificate from my doctor in Lucerne, confirming that no death record had been issued in my name. Ghost message for Claudia and Andrew. A white card, no sender, delivered to the front desk of their building. Just one handwritten line. The dead don't send flowers, but I do. And a small sprig of Edelweiss, the alpine flower that only someone alive in the Alps could have picked. The next day, the Suffolk County Court scheduled an emergency hearing on the advance request for Monday, Antenne Yemwidi. It would have local broadcast, because now it was a public case. Claudia issued a brief note. "We trust in justice." Andrew said nothing. I closed the folder and breathed. Monday. Eric looked at me with the calm of someone who had already crossed deserts. "Do you want to go?" I looked at the window, at the still lake, at the mountain that had saved me. And I answered, "I want to be in the front row, alive." That afternoon, we received another file from the FBI, a call log spreadsheet. One recurring number, made from Andrew's phone, to the Zurich hotel reception, exactly in the days leading up to the sauna. Short duration, objective instructions. The report came stamped preliminary, not conclusive. Eric read in silence, laid the sheet on the table, and said only, "Monday 10 a.m., Bring a coat. The courtroom is cold. I smiled without humor. Cold never frightens me again. And then my new phone, the one no one had the number for, rang once, just once, and stopped. On the screen appeared an ID I had known since he first learned how to dial. Andrew. On Monday morning, the Suffolk County Courthouse was packed with cameras, reporters, and onlookers. The case was no longer just legal. It had become a national spectacle. Claudia entered first, flawless in her staged mourning, the baby in her arms, the posture of a resilient widow. Andrew came right behind, black suit, eyes lowered. The press fired questions. Why is there no body? Who is the baby's pediatrician? Where is the death certificate? They gave no answers. Inside, the silence was cutting. Claudia's lawyers opened folders, displaying dubious reports and hastily stamped documents. The judge, experienced, requested the original death certificate 3 times. The answer was always the same: international complications. Meanwhile, I was already there. In the front row, I wore discreet black, a veil over my face. Anna and Eric had escorted me to the door, but it was alone that I entered and sat in silence. No one seemed to notice, until Claudia, lifting her eyes from the defendant's table, saw me. Her smile froze. The color drained from her face. Andrew took a few seconds to realize. He followed his wife's gaze and found me. The shock struck through him like lightning. First, trembling lips, then the hand that clenched on the table, white from pressure. The room filled with murmurs. A reporter whispered, too loudly, "My God, it's her." The judge struck the gavel, demanding order, but it was too late. The entire courtroom knew. I lifted the veil slowly, revealed a face marked by exhaustion and the fire of the sauna, but alive. More alive than ever. "Good morning, Your Honor." My voice echoed firmly. "I believe some papers need to be corrected." A federal agent, already positioned in the room, approached. I handed him a blue folder, my deadliest weapon. Inside were the Swiss medical certificate signed in Lucerne, confirming that no death had been recorded in my name, the baby photos with different maternity bracelets, the hotel's payment receipt with the initials AW scribbled on the side. The judge leafed through the pages in absolute silence. The official broadcast camera captured every detail, and the reporters typed frantically. "This is far too serious to be ignored," declared the judge. "We will suspend this hearing for immediate investigation." Claudia tried to stand, her voice faltering. "This is a farce. That woman is dead. Everyone knows it." But no one believed anymore. Andrew said nothing. He only stared at me, pale, as if still expecting me to vanish before his eyes, but I didn't vanish. I was there, whole, unshaken. When the hearing was officially suspended, I heard someone in the audience shout what everyone was thinking. She came back from the dead. And it was true. The ghost of Eleanor Whitmore had just resurrected, and now, before the entire country, the charade lay in ruins. The courtroom was hastily evacuated after the judge suspended the hearing. Journalists shouted questions, cameras flashed non-stop, and the crowd outside pushed and shoved to get a better look. But amid all that chaos, one thing became crystal clear. I was alive. Claudia was the first to react. She dropped the baby into the nanny's arms and rushed toward me, her face red with fury. "You damned old witch!" she spat before 2 agents grabbed her by the arm. "Mrs. Whitmore, we ask you to remain calm," said one of the federal agents, flashing his badge. It was at that moment the press realized the FBI wasn't just observing, they were prepared. 2 agents surrounded Claudia, while others collected the folders I had given to the judge. At the back of the room, a technician was already connecting equipment, projecting onto a large screen the forged documents, the duplicate baby photos, the hotel's doctored receipts. Every detail of the fraud appeared before everyone, undeniable. Claudia Whitmore, announced Special Agent Matthews, her firm voice resounding in the room like a sentence. You are under arrest for fraud, attempted homicide, and conspiracy to seize inheritance. Claudia laughed, a hysterical laugh, like someone losing the last shred of control. You can't prove anything without an accomplice. I wasn't alone. The room fell silent. I slowly turned toward Andrew. My son, the man I had raised, fed, educated. He sat motionless, but sweat trickled down his forehead. Claudia's words still echoed in the air. Andrew. My voice came out low, almost a whisper. Tell me you didn't know. He opened his mouth, but no words came, only silence. Agent Matthews stepped forward. We have records of calls from your personal phone to the Zurich Hotel, Mr. Whitmore, times that coincide exactly with the preparation of the attack. We have receipts signed with your initials. We have financial transactions linked to the purchase of the baby. A murmur spread through the room. The press captured everything in real time. Andrew finally lifted his head. He looked at me, and in his eyes there was no guilt, only exhaustion. I knew, he said, his voice broken. I always knew. It was like a blade piercing my chest. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply let the truth settle, cold, where once there had been love. Why? I asked firmly. Why would my own son choose her side? Andrew drew a deep breath, and the answer came out like poison. Because I was tired of being just the son of Eleanor Whitmore, always the shadow of your fortune, of your name. I wanted to be the owner of something. Agent Matthews didn't wait any longer. Andrew Whitmore, you are under arrest for attempted homicide, fraud, and conspiracy. He didn't resist. He simply extended his wrists for the handcuffs. As the two were led away, Claudia screamed down the hallway, her voice echoing like a curse. You should have died in that sauna, Eleanor. But I hadn't died. I was there before everyone, alive. And for the first time in a long time, it wasn't me who carried the weight of shame. It was them. The arrests came quickly, but the trials dragged on as only justice knows how. Claudia was convicted of fraud, attempted homicide, and conspiracy, 28 years, with no parole before 18. Andrew received 24 years, eligible after 16, in exchange for cooperation. No testimony gave back what I had lost, but it brought justice. All acts signed during my death were annulled. The request for a $120 million advance collapsed, and the banks froze every cent until the truth was restored. The family court confirmed the baby was a fraud. No biological link to Claudia or Andrew. Amid the papers, there was a real life, a baby, innocent among monsters. I could have adopted him, but I knew his future needed daily arms, not just fortune. So I made a simple and final decision, to give him to the one who had saved me from the very first moment. Helena, the maid who pulled me from the sauna, who cried with me hidden in the linen closet, asked to keep the child. A single mother, a woman with calloused hands and an unbreakable heart. The judge approved. She gave the boy the name Gabriel Elias, Gabriel, for the angel who freed him from fate, Elias in memory of Richard, my husband. I made sure he would lack nothing. I placed $50 million in an irrevocable trust, with lifetime yields to cover education, health, and dignity. The baby would grow protected not only by Helena's love, but by the inheritance I chose to hand to someone who was true family. And I did not forget Eric. He pulled me out of the chalet on the days I thought of giving up, stood guard at my door, faced risks the police themselves refused to face. For him, I left a house in Lucerne and stock holdings that guarantee independence until his last day of life. Not as payment, but as recognition. Validation came from all sides. Neighbors repeated, I knew something was wrong with that closed-casket funeral. Journalists apologized. Even the church where they had displayed an empty coffin opened its doors for a silent vigil, this time with flowers that did not hide lies. And me? I returned to Switzerland. I entered a sauna again, door open, low heat, Helena with the baby outside, laughing at my fear. I left an edelweiss on the wooden bench, not as a memory of hell, but as proof that the cold of the mountains defeats the heat of lies. My son writes me from prison. I read, I don't always reply. Forgiveness, if it comes, will not be a prize, but a boundary. Family, I learned late, is not the blood that pushes you into the fire. It is the hand that pulls you back into the air. Today, when I think of legacy, I don't see figures or wills. I see Helena rocking Gabriel Elias in a room full of hope. I see Eric walking calmly along the lakeshore, knowing he never again needs to guard anyone but himself. And I see the alpine flower on the table, white as snow, reminding me some things survive the heat. Thank you for listening. Comment what shocked you most in this story. Like so more people will receive this warning. Follow the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Share with someone who needs to hear this.